Hi, this is Tim Clancy with Dialectic Simulation Consulting. Today we want to talk about the story of Cannabis Wild West and how the system map is created and explains the system. So we start off real quickly with customers have ailments, and consumers who have ailments create interest advocacy groups, and those groups produce state proposals, which leads to state criminalization. Now let's take a pause here. What's going on? In this map, what we're seeing is probably what the history looked like 10, 15 years ago, when only consumers of medicinal marijuana, they may have ailments, they have concerns, but no one was allowing them to address them. They formed into interest advocacy groups. The more people with ailments, the more interest advocacy groups there were. That led to more state proposals and eventually the first decriminalizations. Well, what happens after a state decriminalizes? When a state decriminalizes, it creates licenses that are granted to growers, so growers can begin creating medicinal marijuana products. This is extracted oils usually. And you can see here a loop that depicts the sort of the economics of growers. Capacity and quality, their inventory, the pricing and sales, revenue from sales, and reinvesting for future capacity. But we still haven't gotten the medicinal marijuana to the consumers. Well, the next thing to fill that gap was the dispensary system. The dispensaries are, you take the oils and use them to create legal medicinal marijuana sales that gives them revenues to create more dispensaries, depending on the state laws, of course. Now, the final part to connect it with the customer is a feedback loop that when there's more medicinal marijuana sales, there's more word of mouth reporting, and that creates more consumers who have ailments, more doctor visits, more prescriptions, more demand, and more sales. But I want to show something here. Look at how consumers with ailments also leads to more interest advocacy groups. As the word of medicinal marijuana gets out, the pressure to decriminalize increases, and this is why you see more states doing this. But there's also a second loop here, which is called the latent loop, which means there's only a limited number of potential people who would use medicinal marijuana in any circumstance. And as that number depletes, the number of consumers with ailments who are going to be driving advocacy groups also declines, and the people who are buying medicinal marijuana will sort of level off. Now, what happens as this begins working through and more states have decriminalized and more attention gets and we get more advocacy groups? Well, the next thing that happens is the technology firms jump in and say, hey, this is a good market. I want to provide my technical know-how, my R&D, my research to the growers so they can increase their capacity. And you can see here how they're doing that by taking the revenue from the growers, investing it, and providing supply and equipment, which increases growing productivity and capacity. Well, unfortunately, this leads to a sort of an arms race between growers who have access to that kind of technology and those who don't. So here, the unsuccessful growers are going to be depicted as those where they have a tough time matching scale. They may be able to grow, but they can't grow it and create the wholesale price that the stronger competitors have. This leads to weak-hand firms that are going to have to close out, which reduces, for a limited time, the overall inventory until it's replaced by the big growers. Well, once this happens, profits that emerge from these firms, they can't be put in the banks. Remember, federal prohibition prohibits any bank or investment company or stock holding or anything like that. So these profits generally go into two places, which is funds that are not in the banks and state income taxes. Well, the more you get state income taxes, we've all heard this in the news, the more you get a budget benefit. And this creates another dynamic. See, the budget benefit, or perceived benefit at least, creates continued interest in state deregulation, which leads to more decriminalization. However, as governments are prone to do, compliance can get complex. And as compliance complexity increases to ensure the quality and safety of the product, so do the costs, which reduces the budget benefit. Some states that decriminalized earlier are already struggling with how to manage the profits from the medicinal marijuana provided to them as taxes with the compliance costs of what it's taking for them to manage the market in a safe way. Well, as compliance increases, black market sales return. One of the reasons we started this all is to reduce the need for black market marijuana for medicinal purposes. But as compliance complexity increases, that increased the retail price and the wholesale price, and both of those leads to more black market sales, which reduces legal medicinal marijuana sales. Well, the pressure on the Fed to end prohibition is coming from three sources. Interest advocacy groups are also lobbying the Fed. The states, the continued interest in deregulation is going to be attractive to federal planners that are looking at, how to bridge budget gaps, things like that. But the banks themselves, the ones not getting any of those funds, well, they have an interest in this too, because when federal prohibition ends, you can get an investment community entering the market. Now, this is represented by two simple loops of the lending market, which is banks for loans, and the equity market for private equity and capitalization. Well, what happens when federal prohibition does end besides the investment come in? Well, you're going to enter big retailers and pharmaceuticals. We're talking about grocery chains, brand name pharmaceutical producers, maybe seeing marijuana and pills on a bottle on a shelf like you would ibuprofen. this is going to cause a real challenge for the dispensaries because they're not going to be able to match the scale of the big retailers and pharmaceuticals. This is good news for the growers, though, because you see the retailers and pharmaceuticals are still buying their oil sales. Also, what's going to happen with federal prohibition is we're going to see a mass market advertising increase, and there's going to also be additional research, which is going to create additional products and opportunities. This completes the loop, which increases the number of potential consumers who might have ailments, and then everything continues. Now, one last thing to remember about this is all these loops are operating simultaneously, and we'll go through in some later episodes how to simulate individual loops or combinations to see what the behavior might emerge. But for now, if you want to read the full article, it's below in the link. And if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments. Thank you. If you like this content, please like or share this video. You can leave, again, any questions you have, leave them in the comments. And go ahead and follow us on Facebook and Twitter for future updates. Have a great day.